British media are reporting that the UK is on standby to send warplanes to the Persian Gulf. The jets would be stationed in the United Arab Emirates, just a couple of hundred kilometres from Iran. Let's talk about that then with anti-war activist John Rees in London. John, good evening. And the UAE apparently wants a bolstered British military presence there. Now, given Iran's recent threats to block oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz and the huge drama that would incur, will UK fighter jets secure or indeed destabilise the Gulf?
Well, I think it's bound to destabilise the situation. And this is not the first report we've had of Western increased deployments in the area. There have been a whole spate of them in recent weeks and months, which all point in the same direction of increased US, British and other Western nations deploying a great deal more than the normal commitment to the Gulf area. And that's big enough in normal times.
I mean, Britain's Minister of Defence is saying it regularly deploys planes in the UAE. It's not over concerns about Iran's nuclear programme. Nonetheless, though, I guess you've got to ask, is it a wise move at this sensitive time, don't you?
Yes, and I think we're coming to a decision point here. I think many people understand that the condition of the Western stance towards both Syria and Iran is shaped by the US presidential elections. They're about to take place. We know that a new pro-Western Syrian opposition group is supposed to be announced on the day of the US elections, and I think that whoever wins the presidential election in the United States, we can expect developments in respect of Iran to move much more quickly after that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if those planes did arrive, how would Tehran react, do you think?
Well, it's bound to increase the sense of isolation, bound to increase the sense that a huge economic, as we know from the sanctions regime, diplomatic and now military force is ready for deployment against Iran.
Of course, John, must be noted, mustn't it, that the Israeli Defence Minister said in London only this week that Iran's now pulled back from its alleged nuclear weapons programme. So it begs the question why this apparent escalation from other countries at this time.
Yes, I think we've seen a very complex series of sort of moves, counter moves, bluffs, statements and so forth in the course of the US elections about the exact timing and about relations between Israel and the United States over any attack on Iran. But as I say, I think that process is about to come to an end. We read stories that the Israelis and the US have now come to an agreement about a timescale within which they must deal with Iran. So I don't say that that's going to happen the day after the US elections, but I do think that things will move on and will be clear exactly what the programme of deploying further pressure on the Iranian regime is in a week or so's time.
And of course, there's also this big issue of you can have it or we can have it. You can't. Activists accusing the British Foreign Secretary William Hague of double standards on Iran's nuclear programme. He never mentioned Israel's alleged stockpile when he met his Israeli counterpart. Why does it never come up in official talks?
Well, I think we all understand what the imperial structure of the Middle East is, and that is that the Western powers, Britain, then America, with the support of Britain and other Western European powers, believes that it has an absolute right to control this area of the globe, and it employs the Israeli state as its watchdog in the area. So the Israeli state is always beyond criticism, always beyond reproach, always given unqualified support by the United States and by Britain. And some of the most pro-Zionist statements have been made by the current British Prime Minister David Cameron. Really,
really briefly, John, we've only got 30 seconds. The British Defence Secretary says Europe must be ready to play a bigger role in North Africa and the Middle East. Does the region really need the UK's involvement right now?
Well, I think any century, any 100 years that opened up with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, that is an agreement by a British politician and a French diplomat to draw the borders of the Middle East, and we look at what 100 years of that history has looked like in terms of destabilisation, misery, exploitation, invasion and war, and you have to conclude that it is long overdue for the West to keep out.
John Rees, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being on RT International.
You're welcome.